Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Live It Up. This is the show where we explore and discuss how to take your life to that next level and beyond. We cover health, wealth, relationships, and how to create a life you absolutely love. I'm your host and coach, Fletcher Ellingson. Amy will be joining us later in the show as we discuss how to create the experience of love in your marriage. As a reminder, if you have questions that you would like us to address on or off the show, you can send them directly to me at fletcher@fletcherellingson.com. Okay, let's get to today's email question. Hello, Fletcher and Amy. I've been married for 11 years. We have 2 wonderful kids. My husband and I are both employed. We have a home we like, are paying down debt, and enjoy raising our children. For people who are looking in at our lives, it appears we have a fulfilling marriage. It's true we seem to have all the pieces for a great relationship, but the reason I'm writing is because we both feel like the spark is gone. We make a great team, but there just doesn't seem to be a lot of warmth or love. Seems like we are just going through the motions. We're not interested in counseling, but thought you might have some advice. Thanks, Anne. Hey, Anne. First of all, thanks for reaching out. Strong people reach out and ask for help. First off, I want you to know that you're not alone. There are so many couples who experience phases like this in their marriage, and this phase can pass. Now, why do I say it's a phase? Well, let me ask you a question. When you first met your husband, was your relationship like it is now? Was it humdrum, same old, same old? Did you start dating this guy and think to yourself, wow, I love how average this feels. I can really see just going through the motions for the rest of our life. Is that what you thought? Probably not. I bet you felt like you couldn't get enough time with him, right? You likely couldn't get enough time or attention from him. You probably savored the time you had together on those early dates and couldn't wait for the next one. Well, let me ask you another question. What kinds of things were you two doing before you married and shortly after you got married? Were you just sitting on the couch watching TV, doing chores around the house? Or were you going out and seeing movies? Were you playing games? Were you taking walks together? Did you have any projects or hobbies that you did together? Were you laughing? Was there a lot of physical contact? Maybe you gave gifts to each other or planned surprises for one another. Now, I can't know for sure, but I have a hunch you would likely say yes to many of those things, because that's typically how relationships starts. It's partly why you felt attracted to each other in the beginning. Those experiences in that part of your relationship or that phase of your relationship created an experience of love. You felt loved and you felt loving. You felt in love. That was a phase of your relationship. Now, phases can come and go, but here's the cool thing. You created that phase, and if you want to create or recreate it, you can. Sometimes phases may not feel as strong, and other times they can feel even stronger. So what you were experiencing was connection. You were experiencing a sense of being cared for and caring for another person. You felt significant and wanted the other person to feel significant as well. You see, all those are all experiences you can create anytime. You just have to be intentional about it. And yes, it takes practice. You'll hear me say over and over in this show that repetition is the mother of skill. Anything you want to do well requires studying and practice or repetition. So what am I saying here? Well, what I'm saying is the secret to creating a fulfilling marriage is understanding what has worked in the past and then knowing what you want to create in the present and the future. And then you get into action and recreate some of those times where you felt connected and loved. If it was dancing or going to the movies or out for walks, then make it a must to do those things right now. If it was giving or getting a massage, then make it a must to do it now. And I have one more question before we go to a commercial break. Are the things in your marriage that you know you should be doing to create an experience of love, but you're not doing them? Are there things you know you should be doing, but you're not doing them? Well, then to you, I say, turn those shoulds into musts, and you're going to get different results. You see, people frequently don't do what they should do, but they will do what they must do. For example, if you rent, or maybe you're purchasing a house, then making that monthly payment is a must, isn't it? Otherwise, you lose your house or apartment. Same for your utilities, right? If you don't pay for those services, your water and electricity suddenly get shut off. So make your shoulds about your relationship a must as well. I must set a date night. I must surprise him with a gift. I must do some act of service for him. Whatever it is, make it a must. And the biggest must, Anne, is you must understand how you like to experience love and how your husband likes to experience love. Now, if you don't know the answer to that, or even know what I mean, then stick around, as Amy and I are going to talk more about this in the next segment. This concept is super critical to creating a marriage in which you feel loved. And one last thing, Anne, it's important that you put your marriage first sometimes. I have kids, and I love them a lot, and we put the kids first much of the time. But if you don't put your marriage first a good portion of the time, then you suffer. Your husband suffers, and ultimately, the family suffers. This is not being selfish. This is being wise and caring for yourself. So, get into action, Anne, and continue to reach out and ask for help. It's possible to recover that lost, loving feeling, okay? I believe in you. You can do this. All right, we're going to go to a break, but when we return, Amy and I are going to offer some really cool tools and suggestions for Anne and anyone else who wants to create a strong experience of love in their marriage. So stick around. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. We're here with Amy. Hello, Amy.
Hello. So in today's email, Anne asked a question. She described what is a common experience for many marriage relationships. So we decided we would talk about a book that we think can make a big difference for you in your marriage and in the other relationships in your life where it works really well also, such as relationships with your children, your parents, and your friends. But before we introduce the book, I want to talk a little bit about the golden rule and ask Fletcher a question here. So the golden rule we all know is do unto others as you would have done unto you, or treat others the way you wish you would want to be treated. Mm-hmm. So Fletcher, why doesn't this rule work very well for a love relationship?
Sure. So that golden rule, do unto others, we're all familiar with it. That's really set up for a society to help that society work with integrity and to work better, right? So people can get along. Like, I'm going to hold the door open for the person behind me, and they hold it open for me. We attempt to deal honestly with people and just consider other people. And in turn, they do that for us, and it helps the society work well. But in a love relationship, if I'm loving you the way that I want to be loved, I'm not really considering how you want to be loved. And so I could be loving you in all these great ways that I think you should experience love, because they're how I experience love, but you actually could be in that relationship and feel quite unloved.
Yeah.
So today what we're talking about is a book called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And while some of there's a lot of great information in here, you may agree with some of it and some of it you may not. Take what works for you and leave what doesn't. But Amy, you recommend this to some of your patients in the clinic, right?
Definitely, because I have a lot of patients come to me, either they have a physical problem like insomnia, anxiety, depression, that is part of the problem they're having is that their primary relationships are breaking down and they're not having fulfillment and they're not having closeness and connection and warmth, and they're afraid that the marriage is going to end, or they're maybe suffering with lack of intimacy in that marriage. And so it's a book that I've recommended many times, and not just for marriage relationships, but in relationships with children, or maybe even with siblings, like how to create that sense of connection so that person will feel the connection. And it may not be, like Fletcher was saying, it may not be how we experience love, it's how they experience love.
Yeah, I think we've all been in a relationship where we may have been accused of like the other person not feeling loved or appreciated. And I can rattle off the list of, what do you mean? I did this, I said that,
right.
And that may all be true, but it still didn't land with that other person because it wasn't how they experienced love.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, and in the book and online, there are resources too. You can take a quiz and you can find out what your maybe top 2 love languages are. Most people, all of them can feel good, but there's going to be the top 1 or 2 that really hit home and make you feel loved. And I'll just lay out what these 5 are to get us started. So, number 1 is words of affirmation. Number 2, physical touch, receiving gifts, quality time, and acts of service. And we're going to go into those more about what each one of them mean when we come back in a minute. Anything else before we go on the break?
Yeah, when we come back and we're going through each of these, it's an opportunity for you to kind of ask yourself, is this how I like to experience being loved? Do I feel cared for when it's offered to me in this way? And so you can kind of rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 as we go through this. So we'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Live It Up. We are talking today about the 5 love languages, a book by Gary Chapman. And as Amy just mentioned, there are the 5 love languages, and she's going to take the first one, which is
words of affirmation. And so that may sound like, what's that? So really what that means is that that person feels love from verbal communication. So words of encouragement, words of praise, words of recognition or acknowledgement. It might be like, hey, thanks so much for what you did, or you look great tonight, or other verbal reassurances, verbal expressions of love. It may not seem like a lot to someone. Like someone else might be like, what? Wouldn't you much rather me clean the kitchen? But for some people, they would not rather you clean the kitchen. They would rather actually have you tell them something sweet, tell them something nice or encouraging. So words of affirmation is the first one.
Yeah, and also along with that is words of encouragement, right? And for a lot of us, if we have children, this is something we probably do fairly easily, where we encourage our children, we praise our children. When it comes to our primary relationship, like as in a marriage, this may not be as easy or come as naturally because we feel like, they already know how great they are. So it's something to consider in your marriage too.
Yeah, I think the one other way this might show up is if someone likes getting cards or likes getting letters, because it really is still that, for me, because this is one of mine, that turns into a verbal affirmation. I was going to say before we started too that when you're listening to these, one other clue, if you say you have a significant other, they haven't taken the quiz, or maybe you don't know if they will take the quiz, you can sometimes you can guess at what their love language is by what they tend to do. So if someone's always giving gifts, there's a high chance that person actually would love to get gifts. So a lot of times like the golden rule has taught us, we do the things we wish we would get. And so you can learn about what someone may be wanting by what they are doing right now before they understand this different approach, which is really a successful approach to have. Yeah. All right, so Fletcher, on to you. Oh, you were going to talk about acknowledgement, I think.
Yeah, this kind of goes along with that. Acknowledgement is kind of a funny thing in our society. We all crave it. We all want to be acknowledged. It feels good. It's because it's usually around something that we have pride around, and so we want people to share in that with us. But when we acknowledge somebody, what's one of the first things how they might react?
Well, they can react like, oh, that's no big deal.
Yeah, they can kind of brush it off, like they secretly want to be acknowledged for it, but then they're like, no big deal, don't mention it. So they brush it off. Another way sometimes they'll react is they'll be appreciative of the acknowledgement, but secretly they're thinking, gosh, they didn't acknowledge me for what I really wanted to be acknowledged for, or they left out the most important part. So we have all these weird hang-ups with acknowledgement. And one of the things that we practice in our family is acknowledging each other for what we want to be acknowledged for. So in just being bold enough to say, hey, you know what? I'd love to be acknowledged for, and fill in the blank. That's a different way of living for sure. It's kind of radical and different from how a lot of people handle acknowledgement, but it's also a refreshing way. just to say, you know what, I'd love to be acknowledged for how I've been keeping the house, or how I've been keeping the lawn or the cars, or working hard at work. And then the other person just gets to say, hey, well, I acknowledge you for, fill in the blank. And it's a pretty fun way to do things, don't you think?
I do, and I think that if, especially in the beginning, or if you're not practiced and people feel kind of shy around this, the other thing to practice might be even on a daily basis. Say, hey babe, is there anything that you would like to be acknowledged for today? Or what would you like to be, maybe not even asking, is there anything? What would you like to be acknowledged for? And that gives them permission, because most of us are taught to not be boastful,
Yeah.
to not brag. And so it's a time where it gives them permission if you ask them.
Yeah.
So I think that's another little bit to it that you can add, especially as you're getting used to asking for acknowledgement.
Absolutely.
All right, number 2, on to you.
Number 2, receiving gifts. Not giving gifts, but receiving gifts, right? So this is a way that people can experience love, the recipient of a gift. Because the message of receiving gifts, as Chapman talks about in his book, is that I was thinking about you. And I know one of our daughters loves to receive gifts, and it does go along with that message, like, oh, she feels like we were thinking about her, considering her when she wasn't with us. So giving gifts is fun to do. It can be fun to do. And the person, if it's their love language, it really makes an impact for them. And they can be small gifts, they can be large gifts, they can be gifts that last a little bit or long lasting. Just get creative. What he suggests is kind of just listening to that person, making a list. If you hear something, if they mention, oh, I'd love to have that, or I'd love to have that experience, making a list, a running tally, so that when you have the opportunity and you see that, or have the ability to get that you can remember that. So receiving gifts, pretty straightforward, but that's number 2.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point that he brings out in the book many times is people say, well, that's not how we operate, I'm not used to that, I don't know what to do. So even on our drive down here, I asked Fletcher for some ideas about his love language, like, because I want to make sure I'm doing them. Give me some tangible examples of what I can do. So for the gifts, you can also say to that person, what kind of gift would feel good? Because maybe it's something like flowers, maybe it's something like jewelry, or maybe it's just a little note, or it's some other little surprise that lets them know that they're being thought about.
Yeah, good point. And one final thing on that too is, we're not giving with strings attached. This is unconditional, right? So it's not, I'm going to give you this and then you have to do X for me. It's unconditional.
Yeah, or I was upset with you earlier and we had a fight, and then this gift is to make it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, number 3 is acts of service. So acts of service are things that you do for somebody, like it'd be like cleaning up the kitchen, washing the cars, vacuuming out the cars, vacuuming the house, doing laundry, yard work, whatever that person really sees as an act of service is an act of service. And one of the keys for this is that you're doing it without any sense of obligation or resentment. You need to be doing it out of love for that person and not expecting them to be a certain way after you do it, or expecting to get kudos. You just want to do it just to be loving. And this is one of Fletcher's main ones. I know he doesn't mind me saying this. And it's kind of a hard one for me to think about, because it would be like the last one on my list. So I would rarely think that like sweeping up would be a way to, feel loved. It wouldn't really work for me. So that's a good example of how he and I are really different on this one. So I have to keep checking in and be like, oh gosh, am I doing those? Because these are one of his top ways of feeling loved.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, hang on, honey. You were going to talk about your father, Alan.
Oh yeah, my father, Alan. He is such a great example of this. He's just always looking at ways to give gifts or acts of service. He'll bring us wood for the fireplace. We had that huge chore of tearing up all the carpets from our house, and he did that while I was at work and rolled them up. He's always looking for ways of providing acts of service, and it is one of his ways of showing love too.
Yeah, and I think that one thing I would say too is you might be hearing this and think, well gosh, I don't want to clean up the kitchen for him, because things aren't maybe things aren't going well. So I think that what he talks about in this book too is about your love tank. And if you're not feeling appreciated or loved, then sometimes it's hard to muster up the strength and the love to do these things for other people. So you want to start taking baby steps, maybe doing something small, something you feel like you can muster, and it will eventually snowball. But in the beginning, you can have feeling some resistance around it, like, I don't want to do that. That sounds like a pain, and he doesn't do anything for me. So this is something that kind of takes a little while. If you both start doing these love language tasks, then it can start really snowballing. But it can take a little while to feel like you really want to do something major, like clean out the garage for somebody.
Yeah. He talks about your love tank. So this is a way to fill up your love tank. Okay, we only have another minute, so we're going to buzz through these last two. The next one is
quality time, and that's you.
Okay, that's me. Quality time. So quality time is spending time with that other person, making time for them, and making sure that you're not engaged in other activities, but you're really listening. You're asking questions. They feel a sense of engagement with you. So quality time, pretty self-explanatory. And then one more, we've got...
So physical touch. So the thing about physical touch is, like, when we were babies, we all got touched a lot, and even when you're younger. So you're always being held and carried, and that's something that most humans really crave and want. And so this is something that's really important for a love relationship, to have physical touch. It may be varying amounts of it, and you definitely have to check in with your partner on this, because you don't want them to feel like anything's inappropriate or you're invading their space. But this is something that this is a big love language for a lot of people. And if it is your love language, it's important to tend to that. And it doesn't have to be anything necessarily intimate. It could even be, just holding hands or doing a shoulder rub or just touching someone's back can really fill that person up with that sense of connection.
Yeah. So that's it. The 5 love languages. Gary Chapman, pick up a copy of this and start implementing it into your relationships. And now it's time to get going. So it's time to get out there, be a source of kindness, be a source of contribution. You have worth, you matter, and we believe in you.